All right, let's talk about building a fortress, but we're not using stone and mortar. We're going to use strategy. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct those complex, often confusing fire regulations and show you how to turn them into a clear, powerful, and actionable plan to defend your facility from the threat of fire.
So first things first, fire isn't some random magical event. It's actually a predictable chemical reaction. Think of it like a four-legged stool called the fire tetrahedron. It needs fuel, oxygen, heat, and that ongoing chemical chain reaction to stand. Now here's the most important part. You kick away just one of those legs and the whole thing comes crashing down. The fire either can't start or it can't keep going. That right there is the core of our entire prevention strategy.
So that begs the question, right? If the science is really that simple, why do we still see these catastrophic industrial fires on the news? Well, the answer is that while the chemistry is simple, trying to apply that in a complex, real-world environment, one filled with flammable materials, high-powered equipment, and, let's be honest, unpredictable human behavior, that's where things get really challenging.
To tackle that challenge, here's our game plan. We'll start with the basic anatomy of a fire. Then, we'll get into the actual blueprint for prevention. From there, we'll talk about fortifying the facility itself, and then we'll move on to building what I call the human firewall. We'll also cover what to do if a fire does break through your defenses, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with a really practical prevention checklist.
Okay, so every great fortress needs a blueprint, and in the world of industrial safety, our blueprint is something called the hierarchy of controls. Now, this isn't just some to-do list. It's a really powerful strategy that makes us look at risks from the most effective angle first, starting with permanent fixes before we ever consider the last resorts.
So think of it like a pyramid. At the very top, the most effective solution is always elimination, just getting rid of the hazard completely. If you can't do that, you move down a level to engineering controls, where you physically change the workplace to make it safer. Below that are administrative controls, which are all about changing how people work. And then, way down at the bottom, the last line of defense is personal protective equipment, or PPE. The whole idea is to solve the problem as high up this pyramid as you possibly can.
Now, those two in the middle, engineering and administrative controls, they are the absolute heart of our fortress. So let's be super clear on the difference. Engineering controls are about the environment. You're physically changing the workplace itself. Think building a guardrail or installing a better ventilation system. Administrative controls are about the people. You're changing their behavior with procedures, training, and rules. One is the structure of the fortress, the other is the discipline of the guards inside.
All right, let's get our hands dirty and start building this fortress, beginning with the walls and the infrastructure itself, the engineering controls. These are the physical, built-in protections that are on the job 24/7, whether someone's paying attention or not.
The very first engineering control is the building itself. The big idea here is something called compartmentation. Basically, you build internal walls and barriers that are specifically designed to trap a fire in one area. You're containing it, stopping it from spreading, and, most importantly, buying precious time.
And the standards for these barriers are no joke. For example, India's National Building Code of 2016 requires that certain fire-rated doors have to be able to withstand a blaze for at least 120 minutes. Now, why 2 hours? Well, that's the critical window of time that's needed for everyone to get out safely and for firefighters to show up and start doing their job. You're literally engineering time into your building. Okay, so our walls are solid, but what about the systems running inside them? Two of the biggest culprits for starting industrial fires are flammable vapors and faulty electrical systems. This is where engineering controls are absolutely critical for securing the core infrastructure of our fortress.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. In areas where you have flammable vapors, you use special explosion-proof equipment. You design ventilation systems so those vapors never have a chance to build up to dangerous levels. To kill the risk of static sparks, you ground and bond your equipment. And for your electrical system, you have things like overload protection and regular thermographic scans to find hotspots before they become a problem. See the pattern here? Every single one of these is about knocking out that heat leg of the fire tetrahedron we talked about earlier.
Next up, we have to tackle the fuel part of that equation. You see, a small fire can't turn into a total disaster if it doesn't have a giant buffet of fuel to consume. So a really smart fortress design is all about managing and limiting the amount of available fuel from the get-go.
So what does this look like in practice? Well, it means storing flammable liquids in specially designed, approved safety cabinets, not just on any old shelf. It means physically keeping incompatible chemicals far apart. You never, ever store oxidizers next to flammable materials. And it means only having the amount of hazardous material you need for the immediate job out in the work area. It's all about minimizing the fire's potential.
So we've engineered a pretty strong facility, but a fortress is only as good as the soldiers who guard it, right? And that brings us to the human firewall. These are the administrative controls, the procedures, the training, the rules that make sure people operate safely inside the structure we've built.
You know, one of the most powerful administrative controls is also the one that gets overlooked the most: simple, consistent housekeeping. It sounds almost too simple, but a clean, organized workspace is a safe workspace. Why? Because it's a daily habit that stops fuel for a fire from ever building up in the first place. This means getting rid of combustible trash and oily rags every single day. It means having a clean-as-you-go policy so that small messes don't turn into big hazards. It means keeping aisles and emergency exits completely clear, all the time, no exceptions. And that last one's a biggie. You have to control combustible dust by vacuuming it, not just sweeping it into the air where it can actually become an explosion hazard. Now, beyond just being tidy, we need formal procedures. Think of these as our rules of engagement for high-risk jobs. And these aren't just helpful suggestions. They are mandatory systems designed to force a safety check before, during, and after any hazardous work. A classic example is the hot work permit. Before anyone can even think about welding, cutting, or grinding, a permit system forces them to check the area for flammable materials, make sure a fire extinguisher is right there, and even post a fire watch to look for stray sparks. A system like that, combined with strict no smoking zones and regular safety training for everyone, and yes, that includes contractors, is how you build a powerful safety culture.
Okay, but what if, despite our best engineered controls and our vigilant human firewall, a fire does manage to start? We have to plan for that possibility. And that's where our final layers of defense come in, the watchtowers and the emergency plans that kick into gear the second a threat is detected.
This is all about early warnings and a rapid response. Think of automatic smoke and heat detectors as your 24/7 sentries on the wall. In certain areas, you might have gas detectors sniffing the air for invisible threats. All of these are wired to loud alarms and bright flashing lights to alert everyone instantly. And of course, you've got to have well-maintained fire extinguishers, hydrants, and sprinkler systems ready to spring into action at a moment's notice.
But let's be real, the best gear in the world means nothing if people panic in an emergency. That's why practice is absolutely non-negotiable. Mock emergency drills, which should be conducted at least every 6 months, are what build the critical muscle memory people need so that when a real alarm goes off, the response is immediate, correct, and calm. All right, we've designed the blueprint, we've built the walls, and we've trained the guards. Now, let's pull all these different layers of our fireproof fortress together into one simple, powerful checklist. This checklist really shows how every single layer connects. So take a look at the top row. Engineering controls, like using fire-resistant materials, are based on things like the National Building Code, and their whole purpose is to prevent a fire from starting or spreading. Now move down to storage. Using approved cabinets, which is based on OSHA codes, is all about reducing the total fuel load. Then look at housekeeping and administrative control. That's all about minimizing fuel accumulation day to day. You see, each line is a specific defense targeting a specific risk, and it's all backed by either legal standards or industry best practices. It's our entire fortress strategy on a single page.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important point. A fortress isn't just about its stone walls. It's about the constant vigilance of every single person inside it. So, the question I want to leave you with is this. Is safety just a department you can delegate to, a box you have to check? Or is it a culture that you and everyone you work with actively build every single day? The true strength of your fortress really depends on that answer.